Nigeria is the 10th largest oil producer in the world and the largest in Africa. Yet, in recent years, investment and growth of the nation's oil and gas sector have been stunted due to the long-delayed industry legislation that was only signed by President Muhammadu Buhari last month. Nigeria also has the ignominious reputation of being the sole major oil producer in the world that imports refined petroleum products and continues to miss the deadline to end gas flaring in the oil-rich Niger Delta region. What is worse is Nigeria's reputation for oil facilities vandalism and oil theft, which have reached alarming proportions and are impacted negatively on the country's ability to meet its OPEC quotas and grow foreign exchange earnings. The result is that international oil companies such as Shell have been forced to dispose of their onshore and shallow water assets and concentrate instead on their deepwater operations off the Nigerian coast. To assess the perilous state of the country's oil and gas sector, the Petroleum Industry Act, and how these are combining to impact local content development, we're now being joined by Simbi Wabote, Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. Good morning and welcome to the show, Mr. Wabote.
Morning. Thank you for that introduction.
Thank you, Morning. And thank you for joining us. Well, let me take off from Tunu's last comment about the Petroleum Industry Act, which is supposed to help deepen the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. Now, in what ways would that impact, that particular piece of legislation, impact on your core mandate in terms of local content development?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a very important question to ask at this point. Local content thrives only when there are activities in the oil and gas sector. If there are no activities, there is no local content. And like I used to put it, if there is no project, there is no local content. And for quite a while now, the industry has been slow in terms of final investment decisions on major projects. The last one we took, perhaps before now, was on Egina, which happened some 8 years ago when we took FID on Egina. And since then, the reason why industry has refused to take FID on major projects has been the uncertainty associated with the Petroleum Industry Bill. And that has lingered for a very long time. As far as I can remember, spending about 25 years in Shell, I think half of the period I spent in Shell was discussions around the PIB. But eventually, that uncertainty was put aside a couple of months ago when the National Assembly passed the PIB, now PIA, and was signed into law by Mr. President. So all those excuses as to the uncertainty created by the Petroleum Industry Bill is being set aside. And the expectation is that a lot of projects and activities will come on board. And if those happen, then of course, the maxim that no project, no local content will then turn to more projects, more local content, and more activities in the oil and gas industry.
Well, you're celebrating your 5th year this month as Executive Secretary. Congratulations. Can you take us through what you've managed to achieve in those 5 years with regards to local content? Have you managed to, sort of get to where the act says, for example, of that 70%? Have you hit that target? Where are we now?
Okay, if you don't limit me, I hope we have enough time for me to reel out all that has been achieved.
Go right
in 5
ahead.
years, but I'll try my best to keep it short and simple. I think I came on board sometime in 2016 as the Executive Secretary of this body. First thing I set out to do is to decide where I want to be. And I think that's the way to go for any organization that anybody is leading, to say, where do I want to be in the next 4 years that I will serve? And if I have the opportunity for another 4 years, where do I want to take the boat to? So the first thing I did was to set up a 10-year strategic roadmap, because I want to know the end game, where I want to be within 10 years. So we started by doing that. We engaged KPMG, spent about 6 months with them, looked at the act the way it is, looked at what was achieved in the past, and then told ourselves we want to be at 70% local content attainment in the year 2027. So that set the benchmark. And then through that, you begin to walk towards that goal. with various strategic pillars that we set aside: capacity building, industrialization, in-country capacity, helping local contractors move forward in terms of funding. We set up all those 5 pillars, set up enablers to support those pillars, and then set out short, medium, and long-term strategy on how we are going to achieve that. And I can tell you with all confidence, we've been on that trajectory and we are moving forward. For instance, like you know, in order to create an enabling environment for our staff to deliver on what they had to do, we had to immediately complete our 17-story building in Bayelsa State, the current, if you like, until something else come up, tallest building in the south-south and the southeast region of the Niger Delta. Within that story building, we have a 1,000-seater auditorium. I make bold to say perhaps the best auditorium you can find in Nigeria in terms of the quality, in terms of what we presented, and the 4-story car park building. That we completed. We also started rolling in our industrial park scheme. Because look, some years ago when I visited China, I tried to study how the Industrial Revolution caught up with them. I discovered that they did set up massive industrial parks where they incubated manufacturing, because the only way you can change the game, create jobs, retain wealth, is through manufacturing locally. So we've started our industrial park scheme. 2 of them by next year will be commissioned, one in Dukpan in Cross River State, in Bayelsa, the other one. We're also developing an industrial park in Ondo State, in Akwa Ibom State, and also in Delta State, in order that we start to incubate manufacturing, because you can't grow local content if you don't do it locally. You have to manufacture things locally. So that is very much on track. In terms of capacity building, we have recorded over 1 million man-hours in training Nigerians within the oil and gas sector. In terms of opening up businesses, during the heat of the pandemic, we worked with NLNG to ensure that the Train 7 project FID was taken. That in itself will bring about almost $10 billion direct investment into the country. When you look at some of the things we have done, in terms of ICT centers, we decided that, look, the only way you can help students to become very savvy in terms of technology is to introduce them to ICT. We've established more than 50 ICT centers in various secondary schools. By the way, in a sustainable manner. We also got into technical education. I carried out a research sometime, a study of technical colleges and institutions established around the country. I took 3 states as an example. I discovered about 2,000 of them. None of them is functional. People just say skills acquisition, they want to build technical centers. Today, we've been working with institutions that have technical centers in order to develop those technical colleges. We've done one in Akwa Ibom State. We're also doing one in Adamawa. In terms of investments, we took opportunity at government pronouncements in order to change the game and the narrative in all discussions. So we got involved in modular refinery. It was a government pronouncement, the first establishment to venture into it. We took about 30% equity in Walter Smith Modular Refinery to catalyze it. Today, it is producing right there in Imo State. We have about 3 other modular refineries that we have taken interest in. Then when you talk about the gas sector, government pronouncement, how do we utilize our abundant gas in the country? We then got into equity participation in most companies, about 6 of them, invested in order to catalyze the utilization of our gas resources. Today, in about 10 states of the Federation, you have our LPG penetration programs going on, particularly in the northern states, Katsina, Kaduna, Kano, Bauchi, Gombe, and the rest of it all. We are penetrating those areas. So, like I said, if you leave me the whole of the day, I'll reel out most of these achievements. But let me just keep it short and simple.
Well, thank you for that overview. Rufai?
All right. We'll take a quick break, I understand, and we'll come back and I'll ask more questions. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Our guest is still Simbi Wabote, Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. Thank you very much, Simbi Wabote, for staying with us. Before we went on break, Rufai was going to ask the next question.
Okay, I mean, great. You said a lot of things you've done. I mean, testament to that are the awards you've won and things like that. But the problem a lot of people still complain about are the EQs, the expatriate quotas, which is still very high. And when you say all those grand things you've done, it doesn't correlate. Because when you see the expatriate quota, a lot of these expatriates getting jobs in sectors where we can develop the skill for here, and people don't get that job, then people start to look and they don't get it. You know, take for instance, you said you've done a couple of things in the modular refineries and the likes. Yeah, but there's still a quota there. I'm sure most of the fabrication of those refineries came in from abroad. I mean, why can't we start doing things here? You still have deep sea welders that come in from on that expatriate quota. And cases like recently your recruitment that was botched and things like that, you know, a lot of people are asking those questions.
No, thanks, Rufai, for that, particularly on the EQ bit. And I think it's very important to contextualize it. Speaking about it generally will not perhaps give you the answer to it. Now, let me take you back a bit. Before the enactment of the Act, nobody ever monitored the expatriate quota allocation to the oil and gas industry. It was between the Ministry of Interior and the industry. So everybody applied and everybody got it. In fact, in the industry, you had some service providers who seek for expatriate quota even when they don't need them. So it became more like a racket, and they just keep them. Anytime there's an opportunity, they bring them out and bring in the expats into the country. What did we do as NCDMB? We instituted an expatriate quota administrative system within NCDMB. That is online. We then issued biometric passport for every quota that we approve. We issue, they come over to our office, have a biometric capture. Even before you started talking about biometrics generally, we instituted that a couple of years back. So everybody we approve, they come, by the time they get their expatriate quota from the Ministry of Interior, they are registered in our system. So we have a clear database with which we monitor the process to ensure that we bring expats that are brought in are legitimately approved. Now, just to give you a simple example, in terms of the progress we have made with regards to reduction of expats, when I joined Shell a couple of years ago, the number of expats in a company like NLNG was 90% to 10% Nigerians, because that was an industry that was coming up and you needed a lot of expats to drive them. Today, as I speak, the table is turned. 90% of the staff in NLNG are Nigerians, and expats are 10%. That is just to paint a picture on the progress we have made. We in NCDMB, we monitor the trajectory of expats that enter into this country. If I had an opportunity to display for you the graph that has shown reduction of expats in the oil and gas sector. Now, the other bit about fabrication, you talked about it. Before the enactment of the Act, nothing was done in this country in terms of fabrication. Today, we have raised fabrication capacity to about 250,000 metric tons per annum in the country. The Egina FPSO, as an example, the largest FPSO, floating production and operation system in the world, 200,000 barrels per day, was integrated here in Nigeria. During the construction of that...
And the fab was done here.
Fabrication, now, just to paint the picture, local content is not like flickering the switch. It is a marathon, it's not a sprint. You have to take your time because you have to build capacity, because those mental capacity don't happen overnight. These are things you build over time. So we have, that's why when I started, I talked about a 10-year roadmap on how we are going to get there, because we can't do it overnight. During the Egina, about 4,000 Nigerian welders fabricated 6 of the 18 modules that were done in this country here in Lagos. So you build local content gradually. You don't do it overnight. If you try it, everything is going to come to a standstill. Don't forget, you need foreign direct investment in some of these investments that you do. And the people who put the money on the table will demand certain things. So you don't just blank them out overnight. It's a process. We have progressed tremendously. Like I said, if you recall, as an engineer in Shell, any simple thing we want to fabricate in those days was done out of this country, either in Aberdeen, in Canada, or in Houston. But today, we could fabricate and manufacture pressure vessels. We could, all the pipelines that you see that are being installed are being done by Nigerians. Before this, we are exclusive reserve.
On the AKK project?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. On the AKK project, for example, Oilserve is a Nigerian company, was never awarded to an international company, was given to a Nigerian company. But of course, you know how the AKK came about in terms of sovereign loan and the rest of it all that they had to get for China. Of course, if you go to China exit, they have to put things on the table and you negotiate. The other bit of the AKK was given to Brentex, which is a local company. These are things that you never heard of before. All that today is being achieved in Nigeria.
Well, we're almost running out of time. But look, there is an impending divestment from fossil fuels, climate change activists, and also by other stakeholders. There is a new push by Nigeria and other African countries. There's so much talk about energy transition. The back page of This Day Today, there's an opinion there on this transition, renewable options, and all of that. So in the context of all of this, how do you achieve the technological and engineering imperatives for Nigeria and the African oil and gas sector?
No, thanks a lot, Robert. The world has been in transition in terms of energy for a very long time. If you recall, during the Stone Age, we were told they were using firewood, that as a source of energy. Eventually, the Europeans, the Americans, perhaps burnt out all their forests. In the process, they discovered coal, and they felt coal was the cleanest energy as at then. So they transited into coal, and then sold coal as the cleanest fuel all over the world. In that process, they discovered crude oil, and they then transited onto crude oil. And crude oil became the cleanest fuel energy source you can think of in the world. In the process of crude oil, they also discovered gas, which of course became cleaner than crude oil itself. So in terms of transition, it is not new. The world has been in transition for a very long time. But for us, as Nigerians, we should not make the mistake of dropping what we have as natural resources overnight and moving on to what the developed world is trying to push us to. An example today, they say, look, we don't need your gas, we don't need your crude oil. We all fold our hands to say, what next? Of course, they will begin to wag the tail of the dog continuously. But our own transition in this day and age should be a gradual process. And like the minister has said on several occasions, our transition is to gas, which is much cleaner than crude oil itself. And it will take time for us. Today, we've not been able to even harness the gas resources we have in this country. Almost 206 trillion cubic feet of gas. If we go at the burn rate we have today, in the next 50 years, we have not gone 50% of our reserve. So is that what you want to walk away from? So in terms of transition, we must take deliberate decisions and effort to transit into whatever renewables that there are. But for us to get there, if we don't want to suffer what we suffer in the faith of coal, where we walked away today, you have all the coal mines in Enugu, we must invest in research and development. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want to transit, the developed world can tell you, we're not going to give you all the equipment you need to extract your gas. We're not going to give you all the equipment you need to use your gas. Hence, you must do what we say. But if we don't invest in research and development in order to have homegrown technology to use our natural resources, we'll end up the same way coal ended. That's why in NCDMB, we have focused our attention on research and development. A couple of days ago, we launched the $50 million Research and Development Fund in order to encourage research and development through the academia, through private researchers, and people who will bring innovative ideas in order to move forward. The COVID-19 has taught us a lesson, even as a country, beyond transition, to tell us that if you don't develop your own homegrown technology, there is nowhere you're going to go in terms of dependency. Today, people are talking about UK negotiating with us whether the vaccine we took here will be allowable in the UK. It's because we are looking for things from them. If we have those things in this country, the negotiation will be at equal level. So if we don't realize the need for research and development in order to change the game, we will end up the oil and gas sector, just like the coal sector also ended up.
That was a huge missed opportunity, coal.
Well, thank you very much, Simbi Wabote, for joining us. And then we wish you well as you take the NC, the Content Monitoring and Development Board to the future. Thank you very much indeed.